Imagine for a moment that the world you see around you, the coffee cup on your desk, the skyline out your window, the stars above, is just a thin, painted veil. Imagine that right behind this veil, there's a buzzing, chaotic, and perhaps terrifying reality teeming with energies, entities, and timelines that your naked eye simply filters out. Now, imagine that someone built a window through that veil. Throughout history, brilliant and often eccentric inventors have claimed to create devices that could peer into the unknown. They didn't just want to see further or smaller. They wanted to see the invisible. They claimed to capture images of the human soul, peer into the Vatican's hidden past, or expose interdimensional entities walking among us. But mysteriously, these inventors often died penniless, when insane, or saw their laboratories raided by men in black suits. Their blueprints were burned, and their prototypes vanished into the deepest vaults of classified government archives. Why? Because seeing the unseen doesn't just change science, it breaks reality. The human eye is remarkably limited. We perceive a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, less than 0.0035% of what actually exists in the universe. We are effectively blind to the vast majority of reality. The inventions listed below were attempts to widen that sliver. These are not standard scientific tools like the MRI or the Hubble telescope, which are sanctioned by the establishment. These are the forbidden tech, devices that allegedly violated the laws of physics, threaten the pharmaceutical industry, or expose secrets that the powers that be deemed too dangerous for the public mind to comprehend. Whether these devices were genuine breakthroughs or elaborate hoaxes remains a subject of fierce debate, but the aggressive efforts to suppress them suggest that perhaps, just perhaps, they saw something they weren't supposed to. Story 1. The Chronovisor, the Vatican's time viewer. If it is, then privacy is already a myth. Observers point to strange anomalies in Antarctic research stations, like IceCube, and inexplicable funding for particle physics by defense contractors as evidence that this technology is already active. If one nation possesses a neutrino light detector, they can see every card in the enemy's hand. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, relies on the ability to hide weapons. This invention is considered the forbidden holy grail of intelligence because its existence would instantly break the geopolitical balance of power. There would be no such thing as a wall, a vault, or a secret. You could view the internal components of a nuclear missile sitting in a silo on the other side of the world. You could look down at a mountain range and see the exact layout of a top-secret underground bunker buried 5 miles beneath the granite. You could spot a nuclear submarine hiding at the bottom of the Mariana Trench as clearly as a toy boat in a bathtub. It wouldn't just look at the Earth, it would look through it. Imagine a satellite equipped with this lens. Since neutrinos pass through solid rock as easily as light passes through glass, a neutrino camera would effectively make the entire planet transparent. You wouldn't even need line of sight. You wouldn't need X-rays. If you could build a portable sensor sensitive enough to detect the flow of neutrinos, you wouldn't need light to see. The premise is simple but earth-shattering. But in the deep black world of military R&D, rumors of a terrifying breakthrough have circulated. The neutrino camera. For decades, mainstream science has maintained that detecting neutrinos is incredibly difficult, requiring massive underground tanks filled with heavy water and years of patience to catch just a handful of interactions. Because they have almost no mass and no electric charge, they don't interact with matter. They simply slip through the spaces between atoms like a phantom walking through a wall. Trillions of them pass through your body, the walls of your house, and the core of the Earth every single second. Neutrinos are the ghosts of the particle physics world. Story 10. The Neutrino Light Detector. The government wanted to ensure that the man who claimed he could see the energy that connects all living things was silenced forever. Reich was thrown into federal prison, where he died of heart failure just days before his parole hearing. History that the government officially sanctioned the burning of scientific literature. Worse, they gathered tons of his books, journals, and research papers and burned them in a massive incinerator in New York City, one of the only times in U.S. They took axes to his accumulators and cloudbusters, smashing them to pieces. In a scene reminiscent of the Dark Ages, federal agents raided Reich's laboratory in Rangeley, Maine. They obtained a court injunction against Reich, branding Orgone Energy a hoax. In 1954, the FDA didn't just issue a warning, they declared war. The U.S. government's reaction was unprecedented. He claimed his scopes allowed him to see the energy trails of these craft, invisible to the naked eye. He claimed that the concentration of orgone energy attracted visitors. Reich documented battles with UFOs, believing the propulsion systems ran on the very energy he was harvesting. The story turns truly bizarre when Reich turned his cloudbuster toward the stars to manipulate it. He built the cloudbuster, a device resembling a rack of anti-aircraft guns designed to draw dead orgone energy out of the sky to create rain. He described it as a blue bion, a dancing static that filled the sky. He constructed complex tubes and scopes that allowed him to view this energy in the atmosphere. But Reich didn't just want to feel orgone, he wanted to see it. Patients would sit inside to charge their bodies with this life force, which Reich claimed to cure cancer, boost the immune system, and treat mental illness. To harness this, he built orgone accumulators, phone booth-sized boxes lined with alternating layers of steel wool and organic wool. While traditional science saw empty space between atoms, Reich saw a blue, pulsating ocean of energy. Reich claimed to have discovered a cosmic life force that permeates all nature, which he called orgone. However, in the 1930s and 40s, his research took a turn that would lead to one of the most aggressive censorship campaigns in American history. Wilhelm Reich was not a fringe lunatic. He was a protege of Sigmund Freud and a brilliant psychoanalyst. There. Story 9. The Orgone Energy Accumulator. The technology was buried, and red mercury remains the most hunted and most denied substance on Earth. The realization that the sky is teeming with invisible, gargantuan predators was deemed an ontological shock too great for the public. These atmospheric beasts were seen drifting high above the clouds, feeding on electrical storms. Fringe accounts from Eastern Europe suggest that when these lenses were tested for satellite surveillance or high-altitude reconnaissance, they revealed a shadow biosphere. Pilots and operators reported seeing massive, amoeba-like entities inhabiting the upper atmosphere, life form composed of plasma or low-density energy that are normally invisible to the human eye. But the true reason for the ban on this technology might be far more disturbing than military espionage. A stealth bomber might be invisible to radar, but to a red mercury lens, it stood out like a black ink blot on a white sheet. It could see through standard camouflage, penetrate dense foliage, and according to some sources, render American stealth technology useless. A red mercury lens could allegedly bypass the scattering of light that normally obscures distant or hidden objects. This wasn't just about zooming in. When used to coat a lens or housed within a prism, it created a superfractor. Soviet scientists allegedly discovered that red mercury, a heavy, cherry-red liquid compound, possessed nonlinear optical properties that defied standard physics. While often rumored to be a component for pocket-sized nuclear bombs, the stranger and more specific rumor concerns its optical properties. They claimed the substance was real, terrified the Kremlin, and was the key to a technology that made hiding impossible. Yet, in the chaos following the collapse of the Soviet Union, high-ranking Russian defectors told a different story. Western governments have long insisted that red mercury is a hoax, a sting product invented by intelligence agencies to catch terrorists seeking nuclear materials. Officially, it does not exist. In the murky world of the global black market, there is one substance that commands a higher price than gold, plutonium, or diamonds: red mercury. Story 8. The red mercury lens. The base was abandoned, the underground levels flooded and sealed, and the technology strictly banned. Let someone else sit in a chair and dream up the end of the world. The story goes that the technicians had to take axes to the conduits and smash the equipment to sever the link. The only way to stop the creature was to destroy the machine. It materialized in the base, a solid, rampaging projection of pure fear. Because the chair was active, the nightmare didn't stay in his head. The project reportedly ended in a catastrophic event known as the manifestation. In a final act of rebellion, or perhaps a psychic break, Duncan Cameron allegedly released a monster from his subconscious, a terrifying, hairy creature famously dubbed the Beast. The scientists pushed the subjects harder, tried to manifest objects, portals, and even life, but the experiment spiraled out of control. The chair dragged images from the mind's eye and forced them into the physical world. At first, it was simple. If Duncan visualized a solid cube, a holographic or even semi-physical cube would appear in the room. The transmitters would then broadcast those thoughts into reality. When a psychic subject, most notably a man named Duncan Cameron, sat in a chair and entered a trance, the machine would pick up his visualizations. The purpose was to make the invisible visible. Literally, it was a mind-reading amplifier on a godlike scale. The device was described as a reclining chair lined with sensors and magnetic coils, heavily shielded and interfaced directly with a massive Cray, one supercomputer, and the base's gigawatt-powered transmitters. Its crown jewel was the Montauk chair. While the military officially claims it was just an Air Force station, conspiracy lore describes it as a house of horrors dedicated to psychological warfare. On the eastern tip of Long Island, beneath the rusting giant radar dish of Camp Hero, lies the supposed site of the Montauk Project. Story 7, the Montauk Chair. While some files were eventually released, the specific schematics for his spirit radio and his later work on etheric communication have never surfaced, fueling rumors that the government found something in those boxes that confirmed Tesla wasn't just hearing static, he was hearing them. 2 truckloads of his papers and equipment were hauled away. Office of Alien Property Custodian immediately seized his belongings. When Tesla died alone in the New Yorker Hotel in 1943, the U.S., unlike modern ghost boxes that simply sweep through AM/FM radio stations creating noise, Tesla's device used VLF, very low frequency, waves to supposedly capture direct, intelligent communication from the ether. He became convinced he had built a device that could peer across the veil of death, tuning into the frequencies where disembodied spirits reside. The sounds I am listening to are at first like human voices conversing back and forth in a language I cannot understand, he noted. He wrote about hearing voices through the static, faint, conversing tones that he couldn't understand but felt were distinctly human. In his later diaries, the narrative shifted from Martians to something more spectral. He believed that electromagnetic waves didn't just carry radio broadcasts. They could act as a carrier wave for consciousness itself. Over time, Tesla modified his equipment to be hypersensitive to extremely low frequencies, ELF. He famously stated, "I have a deep conviction that highly intelligent beings exist on Mars," but his private note suggests he feared the source was even stranger. They weren't static, and they weren't random noise. While testing powerful crystal radio receivers to track thunderstorms, Tesla reported picking up strange, rhythmic signals. The story begins in 1899 at his laboratory in Colorado Springs. But his later years were consumed by pursuits that standard history books often omit, experiments that drifted into the forbidden. One of his most controversial claims was the development of a spirit radio. Nikola Tesla is celebrated as the father of the 20th century, the genius who gave us alternating current, AC, and the radio. Story 6. The Spirit Radio, Tesla's Spooky Tech. Realizing their control over humanity's destiny had hit a hard wall, the elites allegedly dismantled the machine to prevent panic, leaving the public to walk blindly toward a future that even the most powerful technology on Earth could not predict. They realized that a specific cosmic event was approaching that could not be altered, avoided, or manipulated. The screens would go white, or the data would become unintelligible. Whistleblowers claimed that as the operators looked further toward the year 2012, they encountered a terrifying phenomenon dubbed the bottleneck. No matter what choices they made, and no matter which timeline they inspected, all futures converge into a single, inevitable event. Why? However, the project was reportedly shut down abruptly. It was the ultimate cheat code for reality. By looking at the consequences of their actions before they happened, they could choose a specific path that consolidated their power. The story goes that the global elite, the shadow government, used Project Looking Glass for decades to rig elections, manipulate the stock market, and steer geopolitical conflicts. Instead, it displayed future probabilities, branching timelines dependent on specific choices made in the present. The device didn't show a single, faded future like a movie. By manipulating these high-energy fields, the operators could allegedly peer into the probability currents of the future. It utilized the warping of gravity to bend space-time, functioning essentially as a cosmic lens. According to whistleblowers like Bob Lazar and Dan Burish, this device was not man-made from scratch, but was reverse engineered from recovered extraterrestrial technology. While the chronovisor looked back, Looking Glass looked forward. Deep within the desolate, sun-scorched expanse of the Nevada desert, inside the infamous Area 51, specifically the S4 facility, lies the legend of Project Looking Glass. Story 5. Project Looking Glass. They were trying to capture the first scientific proof of the soul leaving the body, data that the Soviet state reportedly locked away, fearing the religious and philosophical chaos it would unleash. They attempted to image phantom limbs on amputees, and, disturbingly, the energy fields of humans in the exact moment of death. Emboldened by this, Soviet researchers allegedly turned their cameras toward the dying. Classified reports hint at experiments involving the phantom leaf effect. When scientists cut a portion of the leaf off and photographed the remaining section, the energy field of the missing piece still appeared on the film, a ghostly blueprint of what used to be there. But the research grew darker. It was the ultimate lie detector, one that didn't need wires or consent. The camera could detect stress breaks and flares in a diplomat's aura before their body showed any physical sign of lying or anxiety. The Soviets discovered that a person's electromagnetic field fluctuates wildly depending on their emotional state and health. The devices were allegedly used to monitor foreign diplomats and dignitaries during high-stakes negotiations. These weren't designed to take pretty pictures of leaves. They were psychological weapons. During the height of the Cold War, the USSR reportedly developed advanced Kirlian bioscanners, while Kirlian photography eventually leaked to the West as a New Age novelty for photographing auras. Intelligence reports suggest that behind the Iron Curtain, Soviet scientists took the technology into terrifying territory. When he placed photographic film near the spark, he captured a glowing coronal discharge surrounding the hand, an energy field that looked remarkably like a halo. While repairing hospital equipment, he noticed a flash of light between a patient's skin and a high-frequency electrode. In 1939, a Soviet electrician named Semyon Kirlian discovered something accidental and electric. Story 4. The Kirlian Spy Camera. Rife died a broken man, and his microscope, the window to a disease-free world, was dismantled, its secrets buried in the dustbin of history. Doctors who supported him were bribed or threatened into silence. His records were stolen. Rife's laboratory mysteriously caught fire. The backlash was swift and brutal. But cure for cancer that required no drugs and no surgery was a direct threat to the burgeoning pharmaceutical industry and the American Medical Association. It was a 100% success rate. According to the reports, 14 were declared cured within 70 days, and the remaining 2 were cured shortly after. In a legendary 1934 clinical trial, Rife's team treated 16 terminally ill cancer patients. Crucially, this frequency would leave the surrounding human cells completely unharmed. He theorized that if he blasted the virus with a radio frequency that matched its own resonance, it would shatter, much like an opera singer shattering a crystal wine glass with a high note. Rife observed that every virus vibrates at a specific frequency. This visibility led to Rife's second, more revolutionary discovery, the mortal oscillatory rate. This allowed him to see pathogens alive, active, and invading cells in real time. Unlike modern electron microscopes, which blast specimens with radiation and kill them instantly, Rife's invention used a unique system of counter-rotating prisms to illuminate viruses with their own frequency of light. It was a complex behemoth containing 5,682 parts. This was not a standard laboratory tool. Royal Raymond Rife was a genius of optics who, in the 1930s, built a device that should have revolutionized medicine forever: the universal microscope. Story 3. The Rife Universal Microscope. The ability to see the etheric plane was deemed too traumatic for the human mind to handle, and the technology was buried. They could no longer shut out the terrifying creatures that cling to the energetic spectrum, surrounding unsuspecting people like parasites. Some conspiracy theorists claim the chemical is now strictly restricted by government agencies, not because it is toxic, but because wearing the goggles for too long drove users insane. Rumors persist that later iterations of these goggles allowed soldiers to see interdimensional entities or atmospheric beasts that exist alongside us, usually invisible to the naked eye. Legend suggests that the military and occult groups took a keen interest in Daisinin goggles, not for medicine, but for warfare and surveillance. But the story takes a much darker turn outside the hospital wards. He wrote a medical text detailing how he could diagnose disease just by looking at the gaps, spots, and discolorations in a patient's energy field before physical symptoms ever appeared. Kilner claimed he could see the human atmosphere, or the aura. He discovered that when he placed a dye between two glass screens and looked through them for several minutes, his eyes became temporarily trained to perceive the ultraviolet spectrum in a radically new way. Thomas's hospital in London began experimenting with a coal tar dye called Daisinin. Walter Kilner, a respected radiologist at St. During the 1920s, Dr. Story 2. The Daisinin goggles, see in the etheric plane. The blueprints are rumored to still exist, locked away in the deepest vaults of the Vatican secret archives. They feared that a device which could see any moment in history, including every private sin of every politician, king, or commoner, would destroy the concept of privacy and collapse civilization. Ernetti confessed on his deathbed that the Pope and the Vatican hierarchy forced him to destroy it. However, the device was abruptly dismantled. He even produced a photo of Christ's face, though it was later debated as a hoax. Ernetti claimed he witnessed the death of Napoleon, speeches by the Roman orator Cicero, and most controversially, the actual crucifixion of Christ. Like a radio tuning into a specific frequency, the chronovisor could allegedly capture these residual waves and reconstruct them into a visual image and audio track. Ernetti theorized that every event leaves an electromagnetic residue, a sound and light wave that never truly decays, but merely dissipates into the ether. The device didn't travel through time. It tuned into it. He allegedly worked on the secret project with a team of 12 famous scientists, reportedly including Wernher von Braun, the father of rocketry, and Enrico Fermi, the father of the nuclear age. Ernetti was not just a man of the cloth. He was a respected musicologist and quantum physicist. He called it the chronovisor. In the 1950s, a Benedictine monk named Father Pellegrino, Ernetti claimed to have built a device that looked like a television screen but functioned like a window into history. The allure of these inventions lies not just in what they could do, but in what they represent: the breaking of boundaries. Whether it's the boundary between the living and the dead, the present and the past, or the visible and the invisible, these devices promise to liberate humanity from its sensory prison. They suggest that the reality we accept, the one taught in schools and broadcast on the news, is merely a curated exhibit, a safe and sanitized version of the truth. Are all these stories real? Skeptics would say they are merely tall tales born of paranoia and pseudoscience. But the ferocity with which governments have raided labs, burned books, and silenced inventors suggests that there is something out there they don't want us to see. If the chronovisor exists, history is not a memory, but a surveillance tape. If the neutrino camera exists, privacy is a relic of the past. If the Rife microscope exists, disease is a choice made for profit. Until the day the black files are finally declassified, we remain locked in our limited spectrum, left to wonder what monsters, miracles, and machines are operating right under our noses, unseen by our naked eyes. The veil remains drawn, but now you know someone somewhere is likely peeking through it.